Hello and welcome to the Building Foundations podcast. Today I'm joined by Adewole. Could you please introduce yourself? And I really hope I pronounced your name correctly. I'm sorry if I didn't.
No, that's absolutely fine. So hi Jess, I'm Adewole Ademolake and I'm a Senior Development Manager.
Fantastic, thank you. And thank you for agreeing to have a conversation with me as well. Obviously, I've seen you on LinkedIn quite a lot and also in Clubhouse. So I know that you're kind of really involved in the industry. Obviously, all about putting your story out there too, which is fantastic. So naturally, I thought it'd be really good to have a chat to you on here and then share some of your wisdom with anyone listening, really.
Perfect. So, I look forward to it, definitely.
Perfect. So where I always like to start is right back at the beginning of your sort of entry into the construction and property industry. So how did you actually come into the industry? Was it something you thought about? Talk us through it.
So I started off in I remember in my design technology classes and I remember those times when I thought, oh, maybe I could become an architect, because I thought I was good at art, but I really wasn't, if I'm brutally honest with you.
Okay,
but I thought that would be a good profession because it embodies a bit of technical understanding and a lot of design. I thought, you know what, I'm probably right in the middle of that, so I thought, let me consider becoming an architect. But at school, I wouldn't say I was the best student, unfortunately. So that was honest. Yeah, it was very quickly dashed out of the window, basically. But I had an uncle of mine, and he was a building surveyor, or is a building surveyor, still is. And this uncle of mine said to my mum, you know what, your son, I've watched him since he was young, and he's not going to be able to sit still. You need to get him out there, maybe working with people. He's a people's person. He should consider a career in building surveying. So at that point, I then decided, obviously consultation with my uncle and mum, I did BTEC in construction. And that was my entry. I very much knew exactly what career path I was going to follow from the age of 16 onwards. So that was my entry into the industry, or into an understanding of the industry. I did my degree course and I had some amazing teachers that really pushed me. And I was able to then get a good enough grade for me to get into Brighton University, where I studied building surveying. And then after the building surveying degree, I did that for 3 years, came out over 2-2. And then soon after, I did a master's in real estate and got a distinction. So what you find is not everyone is good at education initially. And I think that's the key message, because I went from getting 5 GCSEs to getting merits in my master's, to getting a 2-2, and then to getting a distinction in my master's. And I remember someone in an interview saying to me, how did you go from getting a 2-2 to getting a distinction? And then I think my response to that is, it takes people longer to realize that they have a lot. It takes some people longer to really start to get into their lane and really deliver good results.
I think a big part of that as well is just finding something you're passionate about, isn't it? Because
definitely,
I mean, at school I did okay, and then I did my degree completely unrelated to recruitment in sports science. But I found that when I was studying sports science, I was a lot better at that than, say, when I was studying geography.
Yes.
Or something like that. So if you're passionate about something as well, I think naturally you put more energy into it, and with that you learn more and soak it up, don't you? But that's really good. So for anyone listening, don't worry about how you kind of done at school. Just focus on where you want to be. It's also refreshing to hear that you didn't just fall into it, because what I've heard from some people is that they kind of just fell into it. But you actually clearly sought out that path. So do you think that was just largely from the fact that you had family that were doing it, like you said?
No, definitely. My uncle had a massive, or I would say he was the inspiration and the motivation behind my career choice. But I think the difficulty is, you probably may know, construction and the real estate sector is very, very large. There's many different professionals within, from design all the way to like your structural engineers, building surveyors, etc. But I remember there was a story, you're going to laugh at this. There was I went the first day of my college course, doing my BTEC. I asked my lecturers, I said to them, can you please teach me about the business part of construction? And then they all both started laughing at me. I genuinely did not understand that you could do, I never understood property development at that point in my life, at that age. But that was effectively, it took me, I don't know, 8 years to really try to understand what property development was. And because no one around me had ever done it, no one around me had worked in it. And I am the first out of the people I grew up with that really got into property development. So I would say that maybe for school starters, I think in today's age, as you probably know, early starters are able to understand exactly what they're getting into from a very early age. So I'm a very much an advocate for making sure people like myself are putting themselves out there so people understand what we're doing, and maybe we can inspire the next generation of people wanting to get into development.
Yeah, absolutely, because it does all start from a young age, doesn't it? Because I've spoke about on this podcast kind of at an early age. I didn't kind of, had I known about the different routes you could go down within construction, property, surveying, my career choice may have been different. I mean, now I recruit within it and I love it, but when I thought of construction and property, all I thought was, a builder, trades and labour, basically. And not that there's anything wrong with that, but that wasn't right for me. So it makes me wonder that there's so many people that probably were in a very similar situation in a lot of kind of areas. I know it might depend on school and location as well, but that we're in the same boat. So all these people that kind of the industry could have missed out on.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Perfect. So you did your BTEC, then you did your degree, then you did your master's. So what did you do after? How did you find it actually getting your first kind of job role within the industry?
Well, where do I start? So I'll probably start off from when I was in university at Brighton University. So a lot of my good friends went to do placements, and I was unsuccessful in finding a placement. Maybe because I answered some of the questions incorrectly, but I had about 2 interviews and it didn't materialize into a job, which was very upsetting at the time because every one of my friends had moved on and I was probably left behind with a few of my other close friends. So that was very, very upsetting for me. But when I graduated in the middle of the recession, so the 2009 recession was one of the worst impacted that I've known in my life anyway. And that was horrible. I was not able to find a job. And as you probably may appreciate, a lot of graduates, all they see is the top 4 firms. So you will look at Savills, BNP Paribas, Cluttons, and all of the other consultancies. But we never get an appreciation for the host of roles that you can potentially secure after university. So it could be assistant project manager in a council, assistant development officer. It could be any of those roles. But because early careers from the wider market is not very apparent, you tend to just focus on the big 4 consulting firms. And unfortunately for myself, I had focused too much in those firms. I didn't get any interviews, didn't get any jobs. And then I had to move away from the industry where I worked for everything. I worked for Enterprise Rent-A-Car, the car rental company.
Yeah.
So I had to do that for a year. But then I left there because I was able to secure an internship in a building surveying company. So I left a paid job for an unpaid job. And that was, I didn't think twice about it because I said, you know what, if I can become a qualified surveyor and be a building surveyor, I would take this gamble. Unfortunately for me, that gamble didn't work out because after 2 months into that role, there was no longer a role or it wasn't going to progress into a graduate role. And unfortunately, I was left in the dark. And then that's the unfortunate part of it.
It sounds like you had a really kind of tough ride, didn't you, to be honest, finishing university. Obviously, you've done well at university. You've pursued something you're really passionate about, but then you've had the disappointment of the placement and then the disappointment in taking that role, which some people might have feared taking that role because it wasn't paid, but you followed, your passion, really. What would be your advice for somebody? Because obviously, that probably does happen to other people, I'm sure, and some people struggle to find their first role as well. What advice would you give them?
I think in terms of the advice that I'll give someone, I would say follow your passions, because it all depends on people's circumstances. So at the time I was living with my mum, yeah, so it was easier for me to say I am going to leave a paid job to pursue a passion of mine, which was to get into property. So I would say that people should not be so hard on themselves. If you see your friends driving nice cars, going on nice holidays because they've secured amazing jobs, you have to be comfortable in yourself, knowing that your journey may be different, and you should always use the people and family support that you have around you as well. Because I was able to lean on my mum to say, Mum, I've saved some money, but I am not going to be working for at least 3 to 4 months. And that gamble, unfortunately, didn't work out. But my mum supported me in that process. And without those types of moves, I would not be in property development today, because I made that intention clear that I was willing to do whatever was required in order for me to get into the industry.
So sometimes just take that risk, and also don't be afraid to, like you said, lean on the people around you and the network you've got. Definitely. Yeah, no, absolutely makes sense. So what happened next then? So obviously that didn't work out, unfortunately. Where did you go from there?
Well, it was a very bumpy journey, but I will try and paraphrase it. So soon after finishing doing the building surveying, soon after not getting a building role, working in that firm for 2 months, I then moved on to, I applied for my master's in real estate, because I thought to myself, you know what, I'm not getting the jobs I want, but I can still upskill myself. And that was just very clear to me. And an old friend's mum gave me a lot of money. And then I supplemented it with some savings, and I was then able to pay for my master's, or at least half of it. And that really made a massive impact. At the same time, before I started my master's, I worked for a company called Inspired Asset Management. And this was a property development company. This was a completely unpaid internship. But that was, in my personal opinion, that was the catalyst that gave me the energy, the passion, and the focus to really try to dive into property development. So I was researching comparable evidence, trying to put together the development appraisals, and it was so interesting. And then I went on to do my master's, but there was a bit of a rocky turn. So whilst my master's, I was halfway through my master's, and I was successful in securing a job with GlaxoSmithKline, GSK. That was not a property job. So I thought to myself, you know what, I'm 23, 24 years old. I'm about to earn maybe 27,000 pounds. I'm going to take this job, and we're going to see how far it takes us. And that was probably, it was good, but it was bad at the same time. So what then happened at that point is I left, or deferred, my master's, went to GlaxoSmithKline, and you'll never guess what happened. I got terminated. My contract got terminated 7 months into the contract.
I had a feeling you might say something like that, but I hoped it wasn't true.
No, it did happen, and I'm not ashamed of it, because it's just part of life, isn't it? Things happen.
Yeah. And
it really pained me badly, but the good thing I would say that came out of it is, after that experience, I wouldn't say I wasn't depressed, far from it, but I took a 40-day hiatus. I didn't speak to anyone. I just needed to pray to God, focus my energies, and I knew that I was going to do whatever I can to get into property development. So in that whole period, I then focused. I applied for some part-time jobs, and I got one with EE. And then, due to the wisdom of my mother and my course director at the time, they said, don't drop out of your masters, defer your masters. And that is a lesson to everyone. Listen to your wise counsel, listen to your friends, listen to your family, and don't always listen to people that say yes to everything you're saying. Because at the time I was thinking, no, I'm going to drop out the masters. I've got a job now. But my mum said, you never know what could happen. Defer your masters. And I deferred it. And guess what? I went back to do my masters, and I was able to get it. Maybe it was a bit of a wrong turn, but it definitely put me in the fast lane. And soon after, I was able to get a job selling shared ownership houses for a housing association. And then I was there for 6 months. I learned and networked with all the development people to try and pick their brain. I got enough information from them within that 6 months period. And then I was able to go for an interview and secure my first development job. and the rest has been history since.
That's amazing. It's clearly you're obviously a very resilient person, and I know there's at times where it might have felt like you were kind of just stuck and didn't know where to go, but that just is proof that having the right people around you, having the right mindset, and just deep down at the core kind of being passionate about it, that can kind of push you through those times, which is really good.
Definitely.
If so obviously you've gone down the the development side, and initially your degree was building surveying, and I know that obviously some of that will definitely tie in with it, but did you always plan on the development side, or did you plan on like a more sort of core building surveying role, shall we say?
I think if I had known how to articulate what I wanted, it is very likely I would have gone down the property development pathway from the beginning. But at the time, my uncle just said to me, "Oh, do you like doctors?" I said, "I love doctors." "Do you want to be a doctor of buildings?" I said, "Of course I do." Buildings. So it was almost like he was the closest person that I respected that was doing something that didn't require him to sit behind a desk all day. And I thought, you know what? I really like my uncle a lot. And then, yeah, I just said, you know what? I'll try and follow in his footsteps. But unfortunately, or fortunately, I was able to follow my own footsteps into property development.
No, it's really good because he obviously gave you that little bit of a push and ignited that fire to actually come into the industry, didn't he? And then ultimately you just still found your own path, which is nice as well. So in terms of like when you like you said, you secured that first proper development role, how was it? Like, how was the first year? Was it kind of, was it tough? Was there loads to learn? How would you describe it to somebody kind of going into their first role, and what advice maybe might you give them?
So I think in response to that, I think the first year was exciting. Like, I could not believe that I was managing £30 million worth of projects. I couldn't grasp the concept that I was managing £30 million worth of projects, because if building surveyors may do a number of building surveys and they may charge £1,000 or £2,000. I was directly responsible for £30 million in some ways. And that type of responsibility, I was very nervous in the beginning. I wasn't comfortable making decisions. I very much, and one lesson that I was taught whilst in that industry, my first role, is there was my amazing director at the time, head of development, called John Walton. And John Walton, I was in a meeting and maybe I was 3-4 months in, and they were asking me questions and I was just answering the questions. And he kind of, when we went outside, he goes, "You need to learn to be quiet in meetings." And I said, "Why is that, John?" He goes, "Because you are the client. Whatever you say, it goes. So if you say the wrong thing, all they're going to say is the client said that this is what they want to happen." So we said, rely on your professional experts around the table and let them do the talking. And then you speak to your consultant, who would then convey the message to the contractor. And that was such an important lesson. At the time, I thought to myself, oh, he doesn't think I'm capable, but he was really protecting my integrity in some ways, because if I said the wrong thing, and then there's a massive issue. And I've kind of followed that all my life now. So everywhere I go, obviously I'm a lot more experienced now. I understand the game a lot better. Obviously I'm a chartered surveyor, but that lesson was very much one of the more important lessons that I had learned during that period.
Absolutely. That's a really good piece of advice, I guess, for anybody in the same situation, because you probably could easily kind of get carried away with yourself, kind of going into that first role, can't you? And that is good advice. Okay, so obviously you went in that role and things are going well. You just mentioned there kind of the next thing I was going to come on to, which is you became chartered. So talk us through that process and how you personally found it. And how it went.
Yeah, so the chartership process, unfortunately, you can appreciate that I graduated in 2009, but then I got chartered in 2020. So you can imagine that was a very, very long-term ambition of mine. And I kept trying to reignite it, thinking that I probably can't get chartered, but I was able to keep persisting. But soon after working in the housing association for a year or two, I moved on to a council, and that was Brent Council. And then there was my old manager called Sarah Chowdhury. Sarah Chowdhury sat me down on my first day and said to me, Adewole, I believe that it's very important for you to become a qualified surveyor. At the time, my manager at the time wasn't qualified, but she said that it is going to elevate your understanding and it's going to elevate your status as a professional in the built environment. And that was enough for me to go away that day and register to become a qualified, or at least start the process of becoming a qualified surveyor. So I was there for, I attempted to do my APC whilst working in the council I was in 2018, and unfortunately I was unsuccessful. And at that point, and you probably will know, and you might have heard, the APC, the RSS APC is a very, very difficult process. And it's not the easiest. It's not as easy as doing an exam and walking out and hopefully getting 60-70%. It's very, very tough. But I then made a conscious decision to say, you know what, am I going to get qualified in the public sector? So I made the decision to go into private property development, where I worked for a house builder. And that literally streamlined my knowledge. It streamlined all of my conversations. And I was able to become qualified in 2020. So that was all part of me thinking to say, where's the best environment for me to get qualified? And I thought it was in the house building sector, and I was able to achieve just that.
Perfect. So did you, when you first sat it in the public sector, did you sit the technical interview and obviously have to defer it, or what happened?
So at the time, what happened was I submitted the application. I went all the way through to the final interview. I will never forget it. It was on I believe it was like the 14th or 16th of May or something like that. And I remember it was the worst experience, and a few of the questions I got wrong, because in the public sector, the way that developments are appraised and the commerciality is a bit different to what you would generally find in the private sector. Private sector is profit, and you can do very straightforward calculations. Whereas in the private sector, you're looking at discounted cash flows, you're looking at social value, you're looking at things that may not make commercial sense if tallied up with the private sector, but it makes sense for the council. And at the time, that probably didn't make sense to the interview panel.
Yeah. I mean, I guess you had to wait about 2 weeks for, I think it's about 2 weeks, isn't it, for your results?
Oh, it's a week.
Oh, week, sorry, yeah. So, I mean, how was that wait for you the first time round?
The first time round, I can't explain it. It's the worst experience. Anxiety is a future-based fear, isn't it? Yeah. And I was anxious to the core. It was horrible. I was looking at my phone all the time. I was trying to do positive affirmations. I was imagining myself opening an email that says you've passed. But that 5 day was horrible. It was a very horrible 5 days.
And it's so, because obviously you're not the first person I've spoke to that didn't pass first time round, and you know, I firmly believe that it doesn't make you, it doesn't change how good you are as a surveyor, whether it's first, second time or whatever, because everyone does differently sometimes under those, you know, circumstances, and it can be the experience that you've got up to that date. Like you said, yours was all public sector, so that absolutely makes a difference. But so many people could have fallen down at that hurdle and not thought to move like you did, not thought to redo it like you did. A lot of people have been really disheartened. What do you think kind of got you through that and made you keep moving forwards?
Well, I'm a bit of they call me I'm a very strategic thinker, and I think ahead. So I don't think backwards. I don't think for now. I always think for the future. So I knew that in order for me to be the best professional, in order for me to be respected, and for me to achieve the goals I want to achieve, I needed to get it. So I was, in my mind, I had 3 attempts in the back of my mind.
Yeah.
If I didn't pass the first time, I'll go a second time. If I didn't go the second time, I'll go the third. If I didn't pass the third time, I'll probably go a 4th time, but I thought, we'll keep it up to 3, and hopefully I can bag it within the 3 times.
I was going to say, from what I know of you just from this conversation, I don't think you would have stopped it 3 times. But But no, it is a good way to think, though, to have that in your mind. It's really good. So you had that, and I guess, like, what advice would you typically give somebody if they were, so say for example they hadn't thought in the back of their head they're not going to pass first time, or they might not, and they're going to try 3 times? What advice would you give them if they expected to pass and then they get the horrible news that they haven't, and they feel really disheartened? Is there any advice you'd give them?
I think the main advice, and just I wrote about it in a blog about my experiences not passing. I think they always say that the best surveyors don't pass on the first attempt; they pass on the second attempt, and I'm one of the best.
Of course.
No, but that is just a general saying. But I think, in all seriousness, I would say the difficulty, and I have to paint the picture of the difficulty. In some organizations, you can't move to the next level unless you are a qualified surveyor. So if you look at some of the consultancies, you'll be a graduate surveyor or a surveyor if you're very good at what you do, but you can't progress further until you are a qualified surveyor. And that is the unfortunate irony for a lot of different people. Now, for someone like myself, because as mentioned, I've worked in the public and private sector and it's client side, I don't naturally have to be a qualified surveyor to do the jobs I'm doing, because it's very much about, I don't need to be a qualified surveyor. But if I was a person that hadn't passed the first time, and or I was very much gung-ho on winning the first time, the first thing I'll say is just be mindful that things do happen. As you know, things happen that are outside of your control. The way you come across pressure can get to you in different ways that you can't mitigate against or prepare for. So what I would, my overriding advice would be, don't take things too seriously. You can always go again, you know, and unless, I hate to say it, it's not going to kill you if you don't pass. You just say, just be patient with the process. Go again, lower your nerves and revise. That's all I did, because from my perspective, and I think, believe it or not, Jess, I think it's a psychological thing as well, because I remember when I was going to go the second time, I was telling my wife that whole process was horrible. I don't ever want to do it again. But my wife was telling me, Wale, I think you need to go again. You need to go again. So I think it's just that whole mindset of, they say that a champion will never fall. They may fall down, but they'll always get back up. But on the flip side, a failure, on the other hand, will fall down and just stay sleeping, even if they're not dead. So my thing is this: if you are considered to be a champion, especially in the property development world, because property development is filled with minefields everywhere. So when I say minefields, I'm saying you get planning rejection. That's going to stop you for like a year. You're going to get a consultant that is not easy to work with. You're going to get stakeholders. If you can't deal with your APC and think that this is only going to benefit yourself, and you think you can survive in property, you need to think twice about whether property is even the right industry, or at least property development. So I think that the final point I would say is, it is difficult, but you can get through it. Definitely, because I did.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you made that move from the public sector, to the private sector, how was that in terms of a change? Because you always hear, I mean, I speak to people on both sides of the fence or that transition over, and they always have stories to tell about how it's different and things. So how would you describe it? What was the biggest differences when you made that move?
So in terms of output, or should I say input, is the same, in my personal opinion. The input is the same. So if you look at a general project, you're going to get a piece of land, you're going to get planning, you're going to work with a project team or design team to get planning, then you're going to try and find a building contractor. That input is exactly the same. The output is what's different. So in the private sector, you are delivering homes to sell, yeah? Whereas in the public sector, you're delivering homes to retain. There's a lot more stakeholder engagement in the public sector. From my interactions, from my working experience of both sectors, I would arguably say that the public sector is harder work, in my personal opinion, because we are not only subject to the projects we're working on and our internal boards, you're subject to elected members. You have to adhere to their views. You have to do genuine consultation. So there's so much more. And if you look at the whole bureaucracy, There's the OJU, so it's an official journey of the journey of the European Union. There is what we call public procurement. Everything or every penny you spend in the public sector, you have to follow a process. So you can imagine now, I say, Jess, I want Jess is an architect, and I want you to work on this scheme. So Jess, in the private sector, I will call you, say, hi Jess, can you do this scheme? How much will you do it for? That's a bit fair. We'll get you on board. In the public sector, you can't do that. What needs to happen is you need to go out there, put together a briefing document, get 3 quotations, and then you crack on that way. So I found that the public sector is harder work, in my personal opinion, especially for property development.
There's more processes, isn't there, and more things you've got to get through to get to the end product. Yeah, yes. That makes absolute sense. So for anybody listening now, then you moved to the private sector. Where are you working now?
So I currently work. I would class where I'm working as a public sector organisation. It's a company called Be First, and it's wholly owned by Barking and Dagenham Council. And the particular objective is to deliver a massive amount of homes over a 50-year period, and we're doing some truly remarkable things for the borough. So yeah, I'm very excited to be where I am today.
Absolutely. So if anybody listening who maybe they're kind of at university, or they're studying their masters, what does you can obviously kind of do it quite brief because there's probably loads of things you do in a day, but what does your day look like? What sort of things are you doing, and what sort of challenges do you face on a day-to-day?
So it all depends on the period. So I'll take you from the beginning of a project. It's very much the procurement element that we talked about, going out, getting architects and a consultancy team together, and then it's a matter of briefing and meeting them constantly to define the brief that you want delivered. And it's all of the other stuff. So it's literally, what's the red line boundary, historic information, it's chairing meetings, bringing in stakeholders. So that's the initial part, very much what we do in the beginning. When it gets to the mid part, now we're getting into detail. We're looking at planning policy. We're looking at so much information, trying to make sure that the scheme goes in the right direction. And that will come through, what informs a lot of the work we do is what we call pre-applications with the councils. So you do your pre-applications with the council. You might do a design review panel with a selected few architects, and they will scrutinize your scheme. Or you might go as far as saying, you know what, I just do a pre-application with the Greater London Authority. And then once you do all of those pre-applications, there will be a host of comments that come out, and then it's up to me to be able to work with the design team to try to accommodate all those comments to make sure it all fits in with the brief that we have. That is just the project side. If I was to go even further, on top of all of that, there's development appraisals that we have to do constantly. On top of that, we have to do project reporting, report back to our senior managers, and then there's reports. So in terms of some of the reports that we draft, it's more around, there's different stages in the development. So in the company I work in, there's like 3 or 4 stages. So for each stage, you have to get approval. And all of that is report writing, and it can be very painful to get approval to move on to the next stage. So my job in some cases, I would say, it is very office-based at the moment, but because of COVID, but I can go on site, walk around, community consultation, obviously I attend a lot of the consultations with the community. We speak about their concerns about the scheme or what they like about the scheme, and we just work together. So to anyone in university, I think that if you are an energetic person, if you have a genuine interest in people and potentially having a positive impact in people's lives, I would strongly recommend a career in property development, because nothing beats giving someone the keys to their house and then seeing a person cry because of that, because they never thought that they will get the opportunity to live in a brand new home due to their circumstances. But because I work for the public sector, I get this opportunity to try to maybe assist in delivering amazing homes that people wouldn't normally get, which is amazing.
Absolutely, I bet that's so rewarding. Really, really, really rewarding. You literally, it sounds a bit cheesy, but like you're changing lives really, aren't you? So when you get to that point.
Definitely.
So what do you think, like, obviously you're really enjoying where you're at the moment and doing some great things. What do you think the future looks like for you? Do you have any more plans in terms of maybe, I don't know, additional qualifications, like the next step in your career? What do you think? What do you think it looks like, or you're not thinking too far ahead?
Well, I'm always thinking ahead.
Yeah.
Not always. Believe it or not, I think the RICS process is, a lot of people can appreciate that it probably is the penultimate qualification that you can generally get in our profession. So I think what I'm very excited about now is not only putting my knowledge to practice, but seeing some positive outcomes that come out of it. I'm very interested in things a lot earlier than I did. So what I try to do at the moment, I help people with mock interviews, hence why I do my blogging, as you know. It's not for my self-promotion. It's just to say, when I was coming up, I didn't have anyone's game plan or life to model my life against, wanting to get into property development. So what I thought is, let me try and put together a blog. Let me obviously put myself out there so that someone like myself or like you, Jess, could look on my blog and say, you know what, I see myself like that, I can do this. So I would say maybe the future, in terms of the future, I think what it generally holds is maybe if I can try and inspire the next generation. I think that is extremely important to me. Career-wise, more money, hopefully.
That's everybody's dream, I think, isn't it? More money. But it's good to, I love to hear, and this is like a big part of this podcast as well, is speaking to people like yourself that like want to give back and want to help people through the process that you've been through, but also, you know, chances are people are going to see things like that as well as you go along, who haven't necessarily thought about the industry before and maybe will come into it kind of as a consequence, which I think we could do with more of that. I was going to talk to you about your blog as well. So I guess, I mean, we've touched upon there the kind of things that might be found there, but for anybody listening that's not had a chance to look at it yet, how would you kind of describe it, and what sort of things have you talked about on there?
So the name of my blog is Alake Dreaming, www.alakedreaming.com. And to describe my blog, I would say it gives a snapshot into my life, parts of my personal life, but not too personal. And it also, I would say it's largely a professional blog where I talk about some of the professional journeys I've gone on since I left university in 2009. So I think for anyone, if I was to sum it up, it is an honest account of my life. It is not, for me to mention to you, many people have been fired, as you probably may know, Jess. Countless people have, but rarely do they speak about it. And maybe I shouldn't say fired, very negative, but it has happened to myself. And I talk about it to say that we have to be comfortable failing from time to time, because it is going to happen. And we shouldn't feel that I write my blog from a place of vulnerability, because I think there's a lot of strength that people can gain from a person's vulnerability. And if you want an honest account from a man that is comfortable sharing what he's done right and wrong, I think that is the blog to read, Alake Dreaming.
Yeah, I love that, and I can agree with it as well, because obviously I've had a good look at it, and it is nice to see that vulnerability and that honesty as well. And you're right, like I think with the failure, like I don't really think it's necessarily a failure if you learn something from it.
Yes.
That's the important thing. Like whenever I've kind of gone through anything in the past, it's just about kind of learning, and at the time it might be really disheartening, but ultimately, like further down the line, you can look back and think, well, actually, if that hadn't happened, you know, this wouldn't have happened, or I wouldn't have learned this. Yeah, no, that's great. Well, what I'll do when I post this podcast anyway, I'll include a link to your blog so people can have a read of it. But yeah, I definitely, for anyone listening, I'll definitely recommend it. Okay, so we've talked about, you know, your journey and what you're doing and what the future hopefully looks like. The other thing that, you know, before we kind of wrap up, the other thing that I like to ask people, I think it's good to talk about, is do you see any, we can talk about opportunities, but also kind of obstacles or problems that the industry might be facing even now or kind of over the next few years? Do you foresee anything?
So I think the biggest problem is always collaboration. I think that if you look at the real estate market in its very nature, it is very much filled with many people in different silos. So you've got the architects doing, you've got us as developers, you've got structural engineers, you've got everyone. I think we work well together, but the question is like the advent of BIM, I think that it can make a massive difference in my personal opinion. And it's whether we can adopt it into our work life even more so than what we're doing at the moment, because I'm yet to see, other than when I worked in Countryside and the organization I'm working in now, I want to see more integration from everyone. That is something that there is so much efficiencies that we can draw from if we can pull together as an industry and also just work together. I think, not to say that we're working bad, but I do think that there are areas of improvement.
Yeah, absolutely. What I kind of seen, I guess from like an outsider's point of view, is that everybody's kind of not taken to that yet, have they? So you kind of need, like I said, more input, more people getting involved with it. Do you think there's the collaboration piece? I think I've seen you actually write a little bit about it or jump in some conversations as well about collaboration. Do you think there's anything particularly that could be done to kind of improve that, or how do you think we can tackle it?
So to tackle it, I would say we just need to keep speaking together, not in a professional setting, but maybe in other settings. So as you've mentioned, I wrote an article or a blog post saying how architects and developers can work better together. And from that simple article, I got a response from an architect responding to my points. And it was very much a back and forth. And I posted it on my blog, so you can again read it. But then that whole battle between us, it then morphed into a conversation with myself speaking to architects, me being interviewed by an architect, and then me interviewing an architect. So what then happens is we've now got effectively 4 strands of content that's out there in the World Wide Web that someone is going to learn from. So I think that if we can start having, like similar to what you're doing now, Jess, if we can keep having these conversations, we can keep posting it, and for one person to maybe change their perspective, I think that it can go a long way. But the most important thing, and I think it's something that I live by, is they say to be interesting, you have to be interested. So if I'm interested in what you're doing, you would be more interested in what I'm doing.
Yeah, that makes sense.
There is a lot in it. So I think it's very important for everyone in the industry to not think I am more important than the next person. It should be a matter of, you know what, I need to understand structural engineers, what his pressures are, and maybe he can understand what my pressures are, and we can both collectively manage our pressures, knowing that we are working towards the same objective. And I think if everyone takes time to understand each other, I think that would be good. But there's a final point that someone mentioned to me. So more recently, I did what they call a psychological, like those tests to find out where you are in the spectrum. And I was similar. They tried to laugh, yes. And there's a type of there's a type of way that I work, and there's a type of way that I expect people to work with me. So if you've got a project team, maybe we should all be taking those tests so we can understand how each other's are, so that we can say, oh, that person's a blue, so they want to talk in straight lines. They don't want niceties. They want to get straight to the point. So I think that if we can really start to understand who we're working with, maybe that can also help as well, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. And those tests obviously kind of used by some companies in the recruitment process, and I don't necessarily think it should stop someone hiring somebody or not, but used in the context you're talking about to better collaborate and work together, absolutely, that could be a really, really useful thing to do. And also, like you said, the conversations, so it's getting conversations going between the different disciplines, isn't it? And I think I mean, I know I've seen you on Clubhouse and I go on Clubhouse, and not everybody's on it, but I think that's been quite a good platform to open up conversations, hasn't it, between people all over the world within these different professions. How have you found it?
Yeah, Clubhouse is groundbreaking. I think it's the unfortunate part is I'm very interested to see what happens now that the world is opened up, because I can't sit there for an hour on my phone when I could potentially take my daughter to the park. So yeah. I think it's that type of thing. But I have connected with some amazing people, including yourself, via Clubhouse. And I think that social media, as well as more specifically Clubhouse, you know, that with LinkedIn, it's very static at times. It's very much, and I could have got someone else to write it, but I post it. Whereas on Clubhouse, someone is actually speaking. So you're then hearing the person's passion, you're hearing their thoughts, and you can really get to understand the person through just listening to what they're saying. I think because of that, I think that it is so amazing for literally allowing me to understand what is important to an architect, what's important to a structural engineer, and every other person in the profession. It's been amazing.
Absolutely, I agree with you. I think you're right. I mean, when it first kind of kicked off, there was people spending, you know, literally all day on it. I was never one of those, but I was probably on it quite a bit. But now I'm kind of structured in it, so that might be kind of the way forward, in the fact that there's certain rooms that I know happen on certain days at certain times, and they're what I want to be involved in. So I'll like block out the time in my diary, sort of thing. But you're right. I met yourself through there. I've met some other great property and surveying professionals too. People that you kind of see on LinkedIn, but you don't have that conversation with. And it's opened up a lot of doors. I think it's great. So yeah, maybe that's an opportunity to improve the collaboration. Is there anything else that you think is kind of important to talk about, or do you think we kind of covered your career so far? Or
yeah, I think you know if I was to in terms of the key lessons, I would say that life is an intentional process. It's not something that you can just walk into, think I'm going to be all right. If you come from where I come from in terms of my background, I've got an amazing mum who did an amazing job, and I love her dearly for it. But you have to go out there and make something happen. And I think it's similar for yourself, Jess, as well. So I think that if any of your listeners want to get into property development, or they want to get into anything that is a competitive sport, in my opinion, you have to be a goal-getter. And goal-getter doesn't mean I'm going to run around trying to make £1 million. I'm saying is that you're going to have to stand up when other people are not willing to. You're going to have to speak up when other people are not willing to. You're going to have to allow yourself to work harder, even though no one's going to push you. So in terms of that, what they call self-motivation, I think that a lot of people downplay what self-motivation is, not knowing that for you to wake up in the morning and to actually read a book, you can see how many books I've read, and this goes all the way up, and I've read so much more. This is because of self-motivation. No one said to me, Adewole, you need to read this book, buy that property development law book, etc. I bought it myself with my own money, and I read it, and then I'm going to continue reading various books, because it's something, as I said, life is an intentional process. You have to be intentional about anything. And I think similar to what you're doing, Jess, I have to obviously take my hats off to yourself around this amazing podcast. I think it's good that you are giving out good free content to people that would potentially inspire them to maybe follow similar paths, or even better paths to what the professionals that you're speaking to are following. So the most important thing I would say is people should be comfortable having a digital presence. I think it's something that a lot of people don't tend to consider as important, but you can imagine our grandparents and, you know, the pushers.
Yeah. Yeah, it's my granddad.
So in today's age, I have never physically met Jess in my life, but me and Jess have been speaking for an hour, or coming up to an hour, as a result of a social media or just the internet world. So I would strongly recommend that everyone should use the internet for what it's worth. Don't use it for destructive processes like trolling and destroying people's lives. use it for connecting with like-minded professionals, people like Jess that can help you your journey, because it makes a big difference, in my opinion.
I agree. It can, technology and the advances in it, they obviously are used by some in a horrible way that it shouldn't be. But at the same time, it has got the power to change people's lives for the better and like you said, connect you. So absolutely. I think that's kind of really good advice. And I think kind of with the younger generation, and my children aren't quite old enough yet, but they will start to be active on social media and things. And I think by people putting more content out about the construction and property industry, naturally they're probably going to kind of come across some of that as well. So hopefully it will start to push people into that route, whereas before perhaps there wasn't really much content on the internet, not without specifically going on like the RICS website, for example, and getting that content. And that's really good advice for anybody. When I post this, like I said, I'll include a link to your blog. If anybody wants to reach out to you, get any advice, or just have a chat with you, is it best via LinkedIn?
All mediums, I would say, because I am a person that you can get in touch with. I'm not a faceless, or what they call the people that you message them. I'm not a celebrity, so I don't have any angles. I'm happy to give as much knowledge as I can. So if to get in touch with me, you can either go follow me on or connect with me on LinkedIn. That will be a good point. The second point is my Instagram, which is Alake Dreaming. Send me a direct message, I will respond back. You can also connect with me via my blog. It's got like you can submit a form on my blog and we can connect that way. And yeah, those are the main ones. And I'm a person that you might see around in your local area. Just say hello to me, I'll say hello back.
No, you seem very, very friendly and happy to have a chat, which is good. Thank you very much for your time today. Thank you.
No, thank you very much.
You're absolutely welcome.